Yeah. So I'm Megan Chuprai. I am the COO at A Lit Up Life. We've been working together for over 7 years now. And I basically just run all of like the back end management, do all of like the team stuff, all of like the, back end organization, client management, all of that kind of stuff, just making sure that everything's running well and efficiently on a day-to-day basis. Make sure that Lacey's happy on a day-to-day basis.
Always.
Always.
You're so good at that.
But in terms of like content, like I think it's something where like when we first started working together, that was primarily like one of the first things that we really started to like work on together. And so I'm really excited to talk through this because I think that like, it's something that for us is kind of become just like such a like second nature to us. And I think it's something that like people don't totally know what that looks like or like how to do it in a way that feels good and stuff like that. And so I'm just excited to have this conversation.
It's been really interesting. Megan and I had this conversation the other day because Megan also works with me at Dateable. And we were talking about how we didn't almost realize how many like unspoken, like we just do it that way and we just have this thing and we just think about it the same and all of that kind of stuff, right? Like that we have until we're like trying to translate that to another business and we're like, oh, interesting. So anyway, it's so true what you said. Alyssa said, always up for learning about content repurposing, know how to do it across platforms, but that's really it. Okay. Helpful. Thank you, Alyssa. We'll talk to that for sure. Hey, Shantae. Emily said, is this the template? Yeah. Emily, that's the template like to, that you're entered to win for commenting today. Yeah. Kate said, I love that you're talking about this. I have such a challenge in repurposing. I feel like I want my energy and what is present in the tone of the moment behind what I share. So it doesn't feel good to repurpose yet. Oh, so good, Kate. I have so much to say about that. In fact, hold on. Let me like grab your comment so I don't forget to say something about that. Awesome. Emily said, such a good topic. Always worry about how and what to repurpose. Okay. Yes, that's exactly what we're going to get into. So the first thing I want to talk about is how I feel like content repurposing can hurt your business. Cause I think that's like a helpful, like level set, for what we're going to talk about next. But what I think some people do is they think, well, I'll just write content for a period of time and then I don't have to write it anymore. I'll just repurpose it. Or it becomes like a little too much of a crutch where you have content always there. And so you're just always reusing it, not even like with total intention. You're just like, oh, I got busy this week, reuse content. Oh, I got busy this week, reuse content. And it's like constantly you're recycling old stuff. And I think that's what gives it a bad name, so to speak, or where people have the feeling like Kate of like, well, I want my energy to be in it. And it feels like it doesn't do that. And I actually do think that can harm your business, to be honest with you, because it becomes like content is like your main marketing. And so if you're like not putting energy and effort into your main marketing, like channels, you can expect that to be impactful,
I think it kind of reminds me a little bit of like automated replies and like that kind of stuff where like there's a certain level that like that is very helpful and like can move pieces forward. But if you're relying on like everything is an automated reply and there's no human interaction and no human touch, then like you're gonna feel that on the back end,
right.
Like that is going to impact your business.
It's like how everyone is like all over ManyChat right now. And it's like, that's awesome. And like, there has to be other human elements in that sequence to like really make it pop or make you feel that connection. And those are different things. Right. And I think that that's exactly what you're saying, which is so true. It's like, we want to use and leverage these things, but we also don't want to completely remove ourselves, our thought leadership, our personality, our like energy from the process, or that usually does not go well. So I think that's really important to say. So what we believe is that repurposing content is about freeing up your time to do the most impactful content. Like that's how we really think about repurposing. It's like, how can we free up my time so that it is spent on the most impactful content? So an example of that would be like, I am here every Monday, I'm actually not going to be here on July 31st, which is like, woo, you know, but I'm here every Monday. Like I could be spending this hour block of time writing content, but instead I'm here, I'm speaking it, I'm sharing it with you guys, I'm connecting with you. And that is an important use of my time. And then what our team does is they'll watch this and then they'll pull a post or two from this that I can then edit. And so to us, that is repurposing content, right? It's like I use my time on the most impactful thing, which is also the thing that I prefer, being here with you guys talking in person, but then we're going to leverage that in other ways. So like if someone didn't watch it here, they're maybe going to see a post about it on Instagram in a few weeks, or, you know, there was maybe going to be an email about it or whatever. And so that's really it. We can get into more of the details, but it's basically about how does it free up your time to do the most impactful stuff instead of like, how do you just get out of having to write content? Like that's what we want to make so clear. If you're using repurposed content to get out of content creation, you have a bigger problem in your business, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that's a thing too, where like talking to like the energy piece, I think that allows you to be focused on the things that like you are most excited to be showing up for, to be, whether it's on a live stream or a podcast or writing something, like you're able to kind of get your energy. Sorry, can you hear that? It's storming here. So it's,
no. I thought you meant, can I hear you? I can hear you, but I can't hear anything else.
Okay. So basically like it allows you to focus your energy where you're actually like most excited and what you want to talk about the most. And it's not necessarily like something where you have to be involved in every single piece, and you're not really caught on like, I hear the term a lot of like caught on like the content creation hamster wheel or something like that. And it's not like that. We're just constantly needing to like create more to fill the space. It's kind of like you can really be a lot more focused of where your energy is going.
Yes, so true. Michelle has a great example. She says, every week my VA pulls a clip from my weekly love notes that we share as a reel and post on IG. 100%. It's like smart content. Exactly. Hey, y'all. She said, so good. I use Lacey's way to plan and create content for years. Thank you so much. Yeah. So basically, this is what we're saying. Put your energy in the right places is really the point, and then have other leverage points so that you can step away and you aren't doing it 24/7, but also like it is going to the right places. So like for me, it looks like I record a podcast every week. I record client lessons every week, and I record this live stream every week, right? Am I missing something? Oh, and I write the email. Like I write our Friday emails. So these are like my things that I'm on the hook for. They're time blocked on my calendar, right? Like Angie and I have a time where we do coaching. That's what when I record the podcast. This is always Mondays at 1. That's when I record this, right? Oh shit, that is loud.
It's like, I saw like the lightning like right in front of our house.
Wow,
like, this is a big one. Sorry, guys.
If we lose you, we'll know why.
Yeah.
But like those are like blocks in the calendar. Like they happen. They're like always going, right? And then our team is doing other things with that stuff, right? Like they're taking like the podcast and creating like the show notes and the graphics that we share and all of those kind of things. They're taking a post or two from this live stream that we can share. We're repurposing it into our email, so everything gets linked up in the email. We're taking a clip of this and we're sharing it onto Instagram, on and on and on. But then what we also do, which I think is important to talk about, is then we bank that content, right? And this is the other way we repurpose it is we bank that content, and then we'll reuse that later too. So as an example, Megan, tell me if I'm right about this, but like this week, multiple pieces of new content will go out and multiple pieces of past content will go out. And so that lives together each week. I think the split is almost 50-50. This is the part I wasn't quite sure about.
It's fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So the split's almost 50-50. So we're not having to pump out like tons and tons of content every week because half of it is reused. And there's something really valuable about what was the energy I was in then when I wrote that. And I am always surprised. There was like a post recently on IG that like really blew up, and so many people like were messaging me and they were like, this landed for me for the first time. And I'm like, I wrote this 3 years ago. Right. So there is something valuable about like, I was just in a place then that's like hitting now or whatever. But there's also something valuable about it's both and every week. It's not either or. I think when it goes the wrong way is when it's like only all new and you can't get off that hamster wheel, or only all old and you're just like not connecting with your people in that way.
And I think there's always situations in certain weeks when you will lean fully into one or another. Like, for example, like I'm just going to use this as an example because it was the first thing that came to my head. But like when we did the golden ticket NFT, like that was all new content for like a long time and several weeks because of the nature of what we were doing, right?
Yes.
And because it was new and we needed to speak to that quite a lot. And we didn't have anything to repurpose around that. But then like other times when you were on maternity leave, it was all repurposed. So I think that there's like always going to be times that like you can give yourself permission where it is really leaning in one direction or the other, but that your kind of day-to-day norm is some sort of balance, whatever that looks like for you.
Yes, so perfectly said, Megan. Hey, Jess, she said, love this topic. Hey, Brittany, happy you could be here with us. Kate said, LOL. Michelle said, I feel like there's so much permission here to repurpose content in a way that works for you and your business because my audience changes over quite frequently. And a lot of my content was written while I was in my infertility journey, and that's going to resonate in a different way than the content that I write now on the other side, but there's place for both. 1000%. I always see that like something hits in the right way at the right time based on like where I was when I wrote it at that right. And so there is something really valuable about having that. But I think like if I was just doing that and I didn't have these touch points of the podcast or this live stream or the email or whatever, I don't actually think it would go that well. Right. It's almost like the combination is what helps, I think. And makes it feel fresh and give like fresh perspective. And I think same is true for you, Michelle, right? Where it's like, because you're doing stuff now combined with stuff you did then, like that is actually what seals the deal. And I think that, yeah, it's just, sometimes our brains just have such a problem with both and in so many things, right? It's like, I either repurpose or I create from scratch or like whatever, you know? And I think this is just another one of those circumstances where it's like both matter in your business, but, ultimately a combination is usually what gets you the best result. So let me just speak to Kate's point really quick, since I feel like this is that, and then maybe we can get into some of the specifics of like what the team support and process looks like around that, Megan. But, basically what Kate was saying is like, she wants her energy in it and what's present. And I think like, that's where I would say like, ideally repurposing is freeing you up to get to do more of that. Right. So for me, it's like, I don't think I would have time to like record a podcast, be on live stream, all that stuff every week if I was just worried about like getting our day-to-day, like week to week stuff out. In terms of like a post or like whatever. And so the way I try to think about it is like, this is what gives me the opportunity to put my energy into the most impactful content. So that's how I would try to play with it if you can, is like, okay, repurposing could feel good if ... right? Like it gave me the chance to put my energy into the most impactful stuff. And for me, that's always made a big difference. Go ahead, Megan.
I think another thing too that like is that in repurposing, like people kind of forget about is like, just because you're repurposing it doesn't mean that you are only just like completely hands off. Like even if it's a post that's repurposed from like 3 years ago, you can still kind of be the one to like review it, kind of refresh your memory, do a quick update, and like still put your energy into that. So I don't think it needs to be this oh, I never touch it again and it's just recycled without any edits ever and all of that. Like I think that that's a way where like, most of the time, like even like the repurposed things that we do, like Lacey's energy is still in it because like you're still having some sort of touch point before it's reshared. And it's not necessarily something that is just like, completely out of left field without any like reconnection there.
That's so true. It actually, I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that's such a good point, is that like we talk about this on a lot of other live streams, so we won't today, but it's like, I always am like the final look on something, right? Like our team takes it to like 80 or 90%. And I always am like the final look. Although I will say not always, sometimes I'm like, that content's probably great. You just roll, right? But like generally speaking. And so, that helps me feel more in it too. It helps me know what we're posting. At the very least, I like know what we're posting that week, even if it's repurposed, and there's like a connection point there that I feel like is relevant. So yeah. The other thing I want to say about that is like this at the beginning of my business. So a lot of you guys know this. But one of the things I did at the beginning of my business to really grow is I did a challenge every month for like a year, right?
At least, yeah.
And the only reason I could pump those out and do one almost every month for at least a year is because I was repurposing content. So again, it's like that most impactful idea is like, I knew the thing that was going to get me the most bang for my buck at that time was running like events every month, but I knew I couldn't do that. And right. So that was a way that we kind of did that, is like, okay, this, for the 3 weeks that we're not running the event, we're repurposing content. And then for the week that we are, I'm so engaged. It's all new, that kind of stuff. So, it doesn't have to look like a perfect balance all the time, but that was like, for 3 weeks it was repurposed. But then for the for the week that I was like on, it was like very on. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, I grabbed that. She wants us to talk more about like how we optimize across different platforms. Kate said such a good way to think about it. Yeah, Brittany says sometimes I feel odd repurposing static posts. I do see how it works better if you have a podcast and then repurpose a snippet as a real blog, etc. I love any fun ideas for when you don't have other content. Yeah, I mean, really same to what Megan just said, is like I would just make that slightly different. Like maybe the static post had a graphic that said something, maybe you change out that graphic, or maybe it's a picture of you instead of, right? So it's like, when we talk about repurposing, it's usually not directly like exactly the same. It's usually like taken in some other way. Like maybe that static post didn't, like get as much traction as you wanted. And so you're going to try a different hook in the graphic or something. Any other thoughts on that, Megan? But I think kind of exactly what you were like saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, like that's a great example. Like we could take like a static post with like one quote image, make it into a carousel instead. Yeah. We could make it into a reel, like have it be somehow like a video so that has some type of movement. We could make it into something where like you said, like has like a photo of you, and then we like change up the caption slightly. We might just swap out the first like few sentences or the first paragraph so that like maybe that captures people's attention differently. We might change the call to action. So I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of like refresh something, like instead of it necessarily feeling like you're just like carbon copy and paste everything.
Yes. So perfect. I love that. Brittany said, right, don't overthink it, which is my favorite thing. Overthinking. Yes, totally. Just that I never knew challenge Lacey. She was a good time.
She was fun.
She was fun. She had a lot of energy. Okay. So let's talk about getting team support in the process, what that process looks like a little bit more. I think we're obviously like clear on this idea. And I actually think we could answer Yael's question with that too, because I think we have a really good process for how we like start with one platform in mind and then do things. Jess said she sounds caffeinated. It's so true. That was my like, I was drinking 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day phase. Do you remember, Megan, when you got me that coffee for Christmas and I drank like multiple a day.
Yeah. You were like, I drank 3 of them. I was like, wow.
That's so aggressive. Cool. I am off caffeine now. Go figure. That could tell us a lot. Hey, Lacey. Okay, Megan. So just maybe start like process overview.
Yeah. So it does kind of look different, just kind of depending on like what the starting point is. So like, for example, with like a podcast, the podcast repurposing process is going to look different than like a live stream repurposing process, but the concepts are the same, where like we start with like, where's like the one platform, like where it originates or where it's going to go. So we'll use live streams as an example, just because like we're on one. And so it's kind of easy, but like, obviously this is going to be like, on Facebook, like in the Facebook group, that's where this is like created for. And so that it's kind of like created with that original like platform in mind. And then from there, I'll try to remember all the pieces. Team pulls, like watches and pulls kind of like a replay blurb and bullet points to kind of like, so we can reshare the actual live stream and just share the video, tell people, hey, go watch this replay.
Yes, that's important to say, actually. Let me just stop you there for 1 second, because that's repurposing too, you guys, is sometimes just being like, hi, go watch this thing. Did you catch this thing? Go watch this thing. Go, like, right? Like, that's really important to say, is I think sometimes we forget how much we can just use content to point back to a core piece of content.
And especially if you are using that across multiple platforms, because so for example, we pull these bullet points and like kind of write this blurb that's about like what was the live stream about, why should you go watch it? We use that when we reshare the live stream to the Facebook group later in the week. We use it when we share it to Instagram stories and we pull a little clip from it. We use it in the newsletters. I think those are the primary. Oh, and then on the website, we put it on the website as well. So those are the primary ways that we just reshare the exact video and point people back to the video. And then in addition to that, we do pull 1 or 2 pieces of just like written content and actual posts. And then those will go out in the Facebook group and as posts to the Instagram feed. And I think that that's it right now.
Yeah. And so then one other piece I'll add to that for live streams that I think is really helpful that we do, or that team does, is when they write the repurposed post or whatever, like when they're trying to write a post from this live stream, they actually start with Instagram in mind, because we assume Facebook already got it, so to speak. Not that we won't still post something there, but just to be specific, because it originated here, team will write an Instagram thing. So it'll be like a carousel or something like that. I'll review that and then we'll make that work for Facebook however we need to. But that's important to say too, is like, because it already went there. Like, just like if I write a post for Instagram or whatever, and then team goes to repurpose it, like they'll do it with like the other platform in mind, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that that's important to say too, because like, no matter what, like whether it's like a live stream podcast episode, something like that, like that, it's almost like a little bit more obvious, like, duh, you're going to be creating that for that platform, because that's kind of what that is. Like a live stream in the Facebook group is going to be in the Facebook group primarily. But I think that it's important what you just said to kind of say, like, we do the same thing with posts where we are really writing it to a specific platform. And then once it's created for that, then it becomes easier to kind of make it work for other platforms as well.
Okay, I'm grabbing some of these questions because I don't want to lose them just in case, but I'm copying them all. Jess said, oh, I love hearing that. Can you share for fun how many pieces of content you guys create for a podcast episode? Like you create a blurb and then it touches X, Y, Z, etc.
So for a podcast episode, okay, so Lacey records episode. We'll kind of bundle that all together.
Megan's like, I need to start at square one.
Yeah. Start from scratch. And then it goes to we actually just reworked this process a little bit. So we pull, like, our copywriter writes like whatever the title is for the the episode and like the blurb, like show notes and bullet points of like what you'll learn. And then that is primarily the only piece of content, like written content, that we pull from it. We also do audiograms, like we'll pull 1 or 2 little audiograms. And then we basically use that same content. So we're actually not creating a ton from the episodes, but then we share it. Oh, and then Lacey's doing one client lesson per week specific to the podcast topic.
We were writing a post off of the podcast for a while, but I think with our format, it's just harder, to be honest. I think for most podcasts, I would say that an additional written post off the podcast would be really smart. For ours, it's a little harder to do because I'm talking about things in such short like clips than for our team to have enough context to write a whole post where I don't need to like tell them what I meant and all of that kind of stuff, or where like I don't need to provide additional content. Like it's not really there for how we structure it. So there's a lot of things I would probably do differently if I just like, yeah, I'll ask about reels, and that's another thing I would do differently. Like if I was a podcast host that was doing it differently, I would record video with the person and I would make that a reel probably and try to make that a really compelling, video reel to push back to the podcast and like test that with my audience and see how that works. Obviously, it feels weird to do that because it like is a coaching session and a coaching client. We do record it, but I think to kind of be like, oh, and then can I like also like make sure you look cute because we're gonna like put it all on reels and like that's not it for me. But just to name that, I think that's precisely because of the format we have, not because I don't think that's a good idea.
Totally agree. Yeah. And when I've had other clients in the past with podcasts, and that's what we would do. We would pull more things from the podcasts and stuff like that. Where like, because it was also a little bit different when it's a like standalone thing that can, rather than like a serial listen type of situation, like it's literally.
And just to talk about the reels piece more. So what we always do with that is I do client lessons and then we turn those into a reel. They're definitely not like our best performing things. Like we don't really use like viral reel, like growth strategy. And like, obviously that's just like a trade-off I'm making at this moment where like, I know if I was doing that more in my business, I would have more growth, but like, I just don't want to right now. So it makes sense for us to just repurpose them. So the way that we do that is through, client lessons. But I will say like, I don't like see the most traction on those, but I do get the most feedback on those. So like there is a mechanism that works there. But yeah, I do think it's just sort of like a trade-off. But if I was doing the podcast differently, I'd be using it for reels for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Emily says, what system do you use for content banking so that you have it available for me to review?
So we have like a content, everything lives in Google Drive essentially. So we have a content bank where we have a content inventory through a spreadsheet where we list out everything. That is basically what the content template that I posted the link to, that's primarily what that's focused on, is like, what does our content inventory look like? How to set one up. You can just duplicate the template, all of that. So that's kind of where like everything lives, and we can like search that and kind of put when was it last posted, all that kind of stuff. And then primarily like the actual post and the actual content lives in a Google Doc. We do have like separate Google Docs for different things. So we would have like a Google Doc for live stream content versus like a different Google Doc for a podcast show notes or something like that. And then I would send Lacey the Google Docs to review and make any edits within the doc itself.
Yes, which is so easy for me. And I really, really like that, because then it's like those edits like live there forever kind of thing, right? So it's like they get updated every time, which is really nice. And yeah, it just makes it so easy for me. Like I'm always able to like really quickly like edit, communicate what I want, know that it's there. Love. Okay, cool. So do you feel like we talked about process? I know we kind of got sidetracked with questions. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately like very, very general process, like, either like there's some type of like initial creation period, there's like, whether we repurpose something or we're like, our writer is writing something, like Lacey's kind of the final review. So I think it's kind of like, and again, like we've talked about this in other podcasts or other live streams, but like Lacey's also kind of like just always the final sign off on things, but that kind of ensures that you're still like your energy's still in it without necessarily needing to kind of be part of like the steps 2 through 7 kind of thing.
Yes. And Emily just asked another good question, which is, do I review the images and graphics as well? And no, I mean, for the most part, no. Like we obviously have set pictures of myself that I like, or if there's like, sometimes I'll write like I wrote a post about motherhood recently. So I was like, Megan, use this image. Like, here's a picture of Bennett and I, or whatever. But for the most part, I don't do those. I could if I wanted, because when Megan sends me like the Google Drive, the images are linked up with the post, but I usually don't. Like it's so funny. Kenny and I we're at this furniture store this weekend, and he was like, oh my gosh, this thing, I think we should buy this thing. It's amazing. Da, da. And I like just am not a visual person at all. Like I'm like, I can't even picture that in our space. Like I can't, like my brain just does not think in that way. So anyway, like that's just not an expertise that I really have. So I'm like, whatever Megan picked is probably fine. There's no chance I would do better. So, but if you're someone who's super dialed into that, maybe you'd want to, but for me, I don't.
I think a lot of like our stuff too, like, I mean, if y'all look at Instagram, it's white background with like dark gray text, right? So it's like and we basically use the same templates for everything. So if it was something where like Lacey decided that like she didn't like a template or wanted to update that, we might go into like, okay, let's go into a review process of like what you're looking for. But I think it's for us, like we keep it so simple. And also generally, if there was something to change, we would change it on the template level, and then everything kind of follows that same process. So, and I do think that that's different for different businesses. And I do think that that's different. Like if you are just a much more like visual person, if that's a lot more, of a priority for you, then for sure, I think that makes sense to be part of that process.
Totally. It is just not, it's not my wheelhouse, guys. But that is an important note on like, get out of what's not. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think that's helpful to kind of say too, is that like the way that this works well is like, if like, what's my thing that I care about? What's my shit that I don't? And like, how fast can I like run with that and move through that? Because if I was like, oh, I don't really care about this, but I'm like supposed to look at it every week and I'm supposed to have feedback, and like, that would just slow down our process. So I think it's just good and like know what your zone is, Something that I think always comes up when we talk about this that I'm like so wanting to name today too, is that I think sometimes when we say all this to people, they're like, oh my God, doesn't that just take more time though? Like, doesn't it take more time for you to like get team to do it and then review it and then to like, right? And I think that's a really fair question. There's a couple of things I would say at that point that I'm really curious for your thoughts on that too, Megan. But like the answer is like, yes, but kind of like to a certain extent, does it probably take more time than if I just jumped off this live stream and typed up a quick post about what we talked about? Yes. But that doesn't work for my business model. Like I am jumping off this live stream and getting on a client call because that's how my business is built. That's what, is our bread and butter. It's what makes us money. It's what I love. And so I will always default to wanting to spend time on a client call than wanting to do that. I would rather look at a repurposed post for like 5 minutes, change 1 or 2 things that feels relevant to me and move on. So overall, does it take the business more time? In some ways, yes. Does it frees up my time to do, again, the more important things? And I think that's like the point we want to keep making today. My headphones just like ripped in half. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
The cords are like sticking out. I'm like, but it's like, okay, so is my time freed up to do the most impactful content? Is my time freed up to be with a client or whatever? Like, some of my clients, depending on where they're at in revenue share, are paying me thousands and thousands of dollars every month. So for me to be like, yeah, I would rather write all my shit than make thousands of dollars off this one. Like it doesn't make sense. And I think there is a turning point at business where you have to think about that in leveraging repurposed content and really in leveraging your team.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, it's something where like, it's easy for us now to talk about like all the things we do. And like, it's like second nature to us because we've been doing this for 7 years. This is not how it started. Like it is something that you can start small and build up to that. And I think that that's an important thing to remember too, because I think it's easy to like look at a lit up life and be like, oh, I should be doing all the things that Lacey's doing and like have my team doing everything that her team's doing. And like, that's just not true. And also like, again, you really do have to think about like your business model, your time and energy, where that is best spent, your specific team, your specific strategies, like all of those things play a part. And so I think that that's something too, where like for us, it's very clear that like that is the trade-off that makes sense for this business, because like we do now have like a very streamlined process. So like it does make sense for us to just continue to lean into that and continue to clear up Lacey's time so that it can be spent on client calls and still leave some room for content creation, but that's like the high level stuff rather than all of it.
Yes, totally. Hey, Steph, thanks for being here. Brittany said, love that. Start where you are. 100%. This isn't like get a whole team and build out this whole thing and all of that, right? Like that's such a important point that Megan just made. Like, but it is like, are you spending so much time on this because you think you can't use repurposed content when you could be delegating that? Or opposite, are you spending all of your time doing other things and not putting any energy into your content? Like that, you're going to pay a price for that always, so I think that that's really important. The one other thing I want to talk about very quickly is just like the reason this is like what helps you scale. And I feel like I'm on such a kick about this lately. Forgive me, guys. I'm sure this will get very annoying, but I feel like I have to define scale every time I talk about it now. Because I feel like the only way our industry talks about it is make more money. And it's actually make more money while not increasing expenses. So like your revenue increases more than your expenses. That's scaling. And the reason this is what helps you do that, in my opinion, is because yes, your expenses might increase a little bit when you start getting more help with repurposing and all of that. But if you're at a point in your business where your time, it makes you a lot of money, where like, let's just use an example, say like your time of being like for an hour on a live stream in front of your community is going to make you 10 sales in your launch or something like that, right? You using time to sit down and then like write a bunch of stuff off that versus being on a live is unscalable, really, right? It's kind of what keeps you stuck. And it's what, if you're in that place in your business where you're like, I know I could be making more sales if ... Like I was on live more, I had time to start a podcast, or, I had the ability to do more collaborations, or if I could be on stories more. Like if there's a place in your business where if you were spending more time, you would be getting more sales and you're not repurposing it, you're not scaling. Easier said than done, but it is like important to look at, because like Megan said, like they have it so systematized now, like our team has such a good process there. So to be able to just like funnel content that feels like exciting and I know is impactful into that is really helpful. So again, you can start where you're at, but like it really is like what it takes or what it looks like to scale is being like, I know where my time is best spent and going to make me the most sales. I need to figure out how to get the rest off of my plate.
For sure. Yeah. And I think too, like, even if you don't have a team, even if it's just you solo, like even having those same thought processes of like, rather than like, how can I just start to repurpose 50% of my content, create 50% new? So I'm not creating 100% new content every single week. And then that's like, none of my time is being able to be spent on the things that I know will get me more results, right? So I think it's like also, you don't necessarily need to have a team and a super streamlined process to have that same mentality.
Yes, so true. Oh, I love that. Kate said this is really helpful. I'm thinking about content repurposing differently. I think in some areas I was still relating to repurposing as resharing, and you sharing your process helps me see how to create my own process that works for me to repurpose. I love that. Yes. And I think what Megan said is so valuable there too, right? Where it's like, even if it just starts to like come in a little bit, maybe it's like 80-20 at first, and then it's 70-30, and then it's 50-50 or whatever, but just like bringing some of that stuff in that supports you. Like, that's how I think about content in my business, or our content bank is like, it's this giant support system in my business, right? So like, if I get sick for a week, it's there. If I need maternity leave, it's there. It supports me every single week so that I don't have to be doing more. Like, when you can kind of be thinking about your content bank as like your support system, then obviously your team as well. Like, I think it just feels really good and so different than when it feels like, how do I ever get off this content hamster wheel? Again, I'm on the wheel, like I'm creating every week, but I feel like I could get off at any time, and that's really empowering, you know? Amazing. Okay, cool. Anything else to add to that, Megan?
I mean, I think like this is kind of goes without saying, because I think we've like talked about it in a lot of ways, but like like one of the things, if you're like, okay, how do I even get started with like creating a system around this? Like, I think that one of the most important things is to just start saving your content and make sure you are banking it and creating a bank, because like, even if you're not, even if you don't really necessarily have a plan yet for how am I going to repurpose this stuff, or you're just writing everything from scratch right now because you're just starting and like everything is new content. Save everything, because that, like, the more that you just can start saving things, the easier it's going to become in the future to repurpose and to be able to specifically like pull stuff from the past.
Yes.
Whether you are just resharing, whether you're repurposing, reworking it, whatever. And even if you don't use it ever, just having it, rather than kind of like feeling like if you ever wanted to repurpose something, you have to like dig through Instagram archives or like something like that, right? So I think that that's just like the very baseline. If you're looking for like, how do I get started with this? Like, I think that that's kind of step number one.
So good. Yeah. Emily said she's so glad you touched on doing this as a solo entrepreneur. You're so good at bringing it back to that, Megan. I so appreciate that. And I think that that's true. Like, having it live somewhere that's not Instagram is like the number one thing you could do. Right? Whether it's in like a Google Doc or whatever, even if it's not super fancy and banked yet or whatever, like having it somewhere accessible is so important. I've had so many clients who didn't do that at first and then end up having to like pay a VA to go back and recategorize and catalog everything, because they're like, wait, I want all of that, but it only lives on Instagram. So I think that's really important. Tell us a little bit about content template and like what that walks them through. Like, you know, should they only get that if they have a team? Is it help walk them through the bank? Like, tell them about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something where like you can definitely have it right now, like no matter where you're at. And then like it sets you up for a future team to help you with it. And I'm pretty sure I kind of speak to both in like the training video. So like it'll be applicable no matter where you're at. But basically I just walk you through like how to set up like a content bank and an inventory in a Google spreadsheet, and then how to set up like where to store your content. And like I said, like we use Google Drive a lot. I also use Trello a lot too for a number of reasons, but just for different things. I talk about all that in the video, in the training as well. And then like you get basically just like a blank version of everything so that you can just duplicate it and make it super easy to just start using and customizing for your business. So.
Amazing. So good. It really is so helpful. I cannot tell you how supported I feel by that content bank. So I highly recommend everyone. Thanks about that. Thanks about getting that. So thank you, Megan. I love you. I appreciate you. Link is here too, if you are just like interested in grabbing that from Megan. And don't win, but we'll announce a winner tomorrow. Amazing. All right. Have a good week, guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, y'all.